Welcome to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Kentucky attorney Jeff Roberts has over 25 years of experience. He'll provide answers to your questions related to personal injury and automobile accidents, workers' compensation claims, and Social Security disability benefits. Let's join Jeff for this episode. Hey, Jeff Roberts, welcome back. Today we're going to take a little bit of a look back on the year 2020 and talk really kind of how it affected the practice, how it affected the courts, and most importantly, kind of what it did in terms of working with your clients. So welcome back.
Good to be back, Jim.
Glad to have you. Hey, as we look at 2020, obviously one of the things that some people may not have thought about, but the court system for a while actually shut down. And they caused a lot of delays in the cases. And I think working with the expectations of your clients, that had to be a heavy lift in some regards.
It has been difficult for some of my clients from that regard. The jury trials have been shut down pretty much. They opened up for a brief period of time, but they shut the courts down from jury trial standpoint in late March. I had a trial that was set for May, I believe around May 12th, and they originally shut it down for late March through April, extended that shutdown, so that trial got canceled. It's rescheduled for May of this year. I'm hoping that we're able to go in May of this year, but I've had now, I think, 3 or 4 jury trials that were scheduled that have been continued because of the COVID pandemic.
Right, and it basically not only shut down the ability to get in front of a judge and potentially a jury, but it also slowed down just all the behind-the-scenes work that happens with processing paperwork and doing hearings and motions and all the other things that you're involved with.
Yes, it
the
took
pre-trial stuff, I guess. Right?
It did slow some of that down. It took a while for the courts to switch over to video conferencing, but they have done that now. So whenever they are shut down to in-person hearings, most courts, I think every court in Kentucky now is doing Skype hearings where just the attorneys are present by video conference to discuss motions and pretrial matters from that standpoint. So you can kind of move a case to some extent forward from that standpoint, but if you cannot get it in front of a jury, then you can't finalize the case. Right. And what I have found, and I've talked to other attorneys and they found the same thing, is around the summer, middle to late summer last year, when the court systems were shut down and had been shut down for a period of time, the resolutions of claims kind of started slowing down and to some extent grinding to a halt. We're settling a few cases, but the insurance companies they're basically saying, we're going to keep this. We know you can't go to trial and get a jury verdict right now, so we're going to keep the money in our account unless you're going to take 50 cents on the dollar of what this claim is worth. We're going to keep the money in our bank account until courts open back up. At least they've not publicly said that anyway.
That's kind of how it feels.
Yeah, that's how it feels to me from that standpoint, because cases similar cases that I was settling for $1 figure in 2019 and early 2020, they were offering 50, 60 cents on the dollar for that same case in July, August of 2020.
And I guess they felt they had the leverage there because they had the time to kind of stretch that out.
Right. A lot of cases don't resolve until you're real close to going to trial. Sometimes you may have heard the phrase settling on the courthouse steps, like when you're walking up the steps to go to trial and then the case settles.
And that literally happens.
It does happen, and some settle after the plaintiffs put on their case, and then they accept the last offer of the plaintiff or something of that nature. So, but until there's a finality from a jury trial, a lot of times that they don't put full value on the case, and it's not just in the personal injury side. I see that on the workers' comp side as well, where cases won't resolve until right before a judge is to make a decision in the case, and then they'll put full value on the case to get the case settled. So that's something that's been there for a long period of time, pretty much since I've been practicing law. I've seen that type of thing occur with different companies from there. But with the pandemic and jury trials being canceled out or continued, it's just making it more difficult to resolve a lot of the personal injury type cases.
Right. And so now in the workers' compensation system, in that whole system, how did that did they adapt fairly quickly to video, and kind of how did that area of law or that area of the court system adapt to the COVID pressure and pandemic?
The workers' comp adapted quicker than any other area that I practice in, or any other court system that I practice in, to the pandemic. They switched to video conference hearings fairly quickly. I know I was talking to some of the judges about it in April. I had actually started doing Zoom depositions early April. I had my first Zoom deposition scheduled, and I talked to some judges on cases that we were close to a final hearing. We're setting final hearings, and offered that option to them to have a Zoom hearing, video conference hearing in late April, and was informed then that the Department of Workers' Claims was already looking into that, but they wanted to set the process up through their system so that they could govern and control the security of it, which I understood completely from that standpoint. But by, I believe, mid-May, they had already started doing Zoom hearings with the judges from there. And to some extent, I think that's probably going to stay even after the pandemic to some extent in the workers' compensation arena. I think we'll go back to in-person final hearings in front of a judge, but like some of the pretrial stuff, there's what's called a benefit review conference, which is just a fancy name for a pre-hearing conference, where primarily the attorneys are talking to the judge about stipulations and contested issues. The claimants are there for that, but before the pandemic, that was in person. I suspect that's going to be done by video conference or teleconference now, even after the pandemic is over with, which hopefully will be soon, just because it is a time-consuming or time-saving measure for everybody. I don't have to drive to Paducah or Bowling Green for what's basically a 30-minute conference. I can sit in my office and look at the judge, look at the defense attorney. We could discuss all the topics there and do everything by video conference. And the judge, sometimes I have a judge that's in Pikeville for the Paducah docket, and so they had to drive from from Pikeville to Paducah and then drive back. Now, it wasn't just for my case. They had a day or 2 days worth of cases they were dealing with, but still, that's a long drive for something that can be done by video conference just as easily.
Well, so there may be a little bit of a benefit to having gone through this in that regard. So we've talked about civil trials, personal injury type case. We've talked about workers' comp. But another significant part of your practice is dealing with the Social Security benefit system, SSDI, SSI. How did that adapt?
That was they switched over to telephonic hearings fairly quickly. I had a couple of hearings scheduled in May of 2024 in 1 week, actually, that were going to be in person, and they switched those over to telephonic hearings there. And a couple of those did take place because I knew the judge and was comfortable with that judge and how that judge ruled, and I knew what my evidence was. So I was comfortable with the judge doing a telephonic hearing in those cases. A few years ago anyway, I can't remember how many, Social Security started doing video conference hearings, but they did them in their hearing sites. So, I'd go to Paducah with my client for a video conference hearing. I'd be in the hearing office, and we'd be looking at a TV screen, and the judge would be in Savannah, Georgia, or Chicago, Illinois, or somewhere else.
Social Security is federal anyway.
Yes, and so when they started doing that, I did that for a few hearings and did not have good luck with that, didn't have good success with that, and talked to other attorneys, and they were having the same concerns with that as I was. As you know from what you do, communication is not just verbal. In fact, a large portion of communication is nonverbal communication, and especially when you're judging the credibility of someone, I think seeing that person face to face and you can see how their facial expressions are. You can see if they're shifting in their chair because of pain. A lot better in person than you can from looking at a little 2 foot by 2 foot box on the TV screen or something of that nature. And I think that was a big part of the hearings not being as successful when we did them by telephonic hearing. And luckily, I was successful in getting several of those overturned and sent back, and we had in-person hearings and had different results on several of those. So when they switched over to the telephonic hearings, I had a conversation with my clients that, like a lot of people, I thought this was going to be a short process with the pandemic.
Right. When it first started building, and
when it first started, we're going to shut things down for a brief period of time to lessen the curve. And I understand it. I think it grew greater than anybody was originally anticipating it to grow from there. And so I had the conversation with my clients. I think we're better off, even if we're pushing the hearing back 3 or 4 months, not doing a telephonic hearing, because I think our chances of success are much greater in person than they are telephonic. And the clients agreed with me and wanted to do what was best. Now, they're starting to do video conference hearings where the claimants and the attorney don't have to be at the hearing site. So, they've got the hearing site shut down. I don't think people can even go in there at this point, as far as the public anyway. But I can do it from, I don't know if they're going to use Zoom, or actually I do know they're using Microsoft Teams. But I can do it in my office, have my client in my office where we can social distance from that standpoint and make sure we got a good internet connection that way. And so I'm starting to move forward with doing the video conference hearings, even though that's not my preference. The clients are needing that to start moving forward and having their claims resolved. So we're I think my first one said in April.
No, and that comes back to an area that I really want to spend some time with you on, and it's dealing with the client's concerns and setting the proper expectations. Because I think if you watch enough attorney ads on television, everybody's got $1 million case, everybody's got this. I mean, and it's not always reality. And the speed at which these cases progress is not really what a lot of people assume coming into it. And we've had other podcast episodes where we've talked about why these cases take a long time. Some of it's because dealing with trying to get to the maximum medical improvement, that MMI. You want to talk about that real briefly to kind of give people an idea?
Yeah, that's I don't resolve a case as a general rule until my client reaches maximum medical improvement. The reason being, I don't know what my client's total damages are until they reach maximum medical improvement.
And what is that really?
Maximum medical improvement is a term. It basically means that you're as good as you're going to be from an injury. It doesn't mean you're cured or you're healed from the injury. It just means they don't expect any significant improvement to occur at that point. So, when somebody has surgery, depending on the nature of surgery, 6 months out from surgery, they believe maximum healing has occurred. Some surgeries may be a year out from surgery that maximum healing occurs, and they don't anticipate any more improvement or significant improvement after that date from that standpoint. And that doesn't mean that you're not improved significantly even before that. Like a lot of times with a spinal surgery, they'll say a year out before maximum improvement occurs, but the person may be able to return back to work at 6 months or 4 months, depending on the type of job they do. So, you can improve significantly and hopefully will improve significantly in the first short period of time after the surgery. That's the reason you have the surgery, but your body can still regenerate and heal for a considerable period of time after that. So you get to that date where they say, we don't anticipate anything significant changing from this point forward.
And part of that involves, obviously, there could be multiple surgeries, but ultimately it's also a value, an aspect of the case value. If you've got all these other medical bills that are still building, and you said, okay, well, we're going to settle now, or we're going to try to go to trial now, and you've still got a lot more expenses coming in, you've got to be able to account for those. So as we get into, talking about the expectations, suddenly COVID steps in or, hits us, and it slows down everything. And so if I've been waiting 6 months, a year, and now I can't even get to trial, or I can't even get the other side to begin settlement discussions. How do you talk to your client? I mean, that's got to be frustrating for everybody.
It is extremely frustrating for the client, especially, and it's frustrating for me to have to sit down and talk to my clients about that. That your claim is being delayed because of reasons beyond my control, beyond your control, from that standpoint, and even though you're at maximum medical improvement, and I told you going in, once you reach maximum medical improvement, we would start settlement negotiations. We'd try to get it in front of a judge or a jury. Because of this, we can't do that, and so they're only offering this. I think your claim is worth significantly more than what the offer is, and so I think we're better off waiting the year or however long we have to wait to get full value for your case. And and I've had that conversation with more clients than I'd like over the last year from that standpoint. And it's it's an impact on the client significantly from that standpoint. And I told people early on, people asked me how I was, how things were doing in my practice, and the type of practice that I have, it's when there's an economic impact on the country or the state or my local area, I really don't feel it right then, because I do have the cases that even when the thing shut down, I already had cases that had settled in January, February, March. That we were still processing some of the final things, getting subrogation amounts on how much I had to go back to the insurance company, health insurance, or waiting for judge approval in a workers' comp case or in a Social Security case. It takes a while for them to process and make the payment. So I didn't feel the impact of the pandemic early on like everybody else did. It's a delayed reaction in the type of practice that I have. But my clients started feeling it pretty, the current clients felt it then that would have been resolving at the end of the year.
Right. The ones who were kind of already in the process, they were still seeing results. Funds were still being dispersed. And I guess in the area of Kentucky workers' comp, I mean, some of those are getting treated already with TMI and things like that.
Yeah. The workers.
I'm sorry, TTD.
Yeah. The workers' comp is the one area that has moved forward because the workers' comp system, the Department of Workers' Claims switched over into May to the video conference hearings. In those cases, the credibility of the plaintiff is certainly an issue in those cases, but it's nowhere near as significant of a piece of the puzzle as it is in a Social Security disability case, as it is in a personal injury case. From there, the medical side in a workers' comp, the impairment ratings that the doctors give, the restrictions that the doctors give, the past work history of the injured worker are as big of a piece of the puzzle as the claimant's credibility. So switching those over to video conference hearings, there wasn't as big of an issue with doing those in video conference hearings, and we were able to move those cases and continue to move those cases forward, settle them, or get a judge's decision in those cases. So my workers' comp practice has continued on. I mean, it's been affected somewhat, but nowhere near as drastically as the Social Security side. The Social Security cases or the personal injury cases. And it's not just me. I think anybody who does the area that I do are saying the same thing. They're having difficulty settling car wreck cases or other types of personal injury cases, or having difficulty with Social Security cases. And I've talked to several Social Security attorneys throughout the state and even out of this state that were the same as I was, and they just weren't comfortable doing the telephonic hearings just because they didn't think they were going to get as good of a result for their client.
Right, and that makes sense. And I love the fact that you said you're talking to people across the state. I mean, realistically, you're based out of Calloway County, but you're handling cases all over the place. I mean, you're handling cases obviously over in Paducah, but you're handling cases over in Pikeville. You're handling cases in Central Kentucky. I mean, you're doing, your practice is a lot broader than some people may realize.
It is. I handle workers' compensation, personal injury cases all over the state. From that standpoint, in fact, earlier this month, I had an attorney in Louisville that referred a workers' compensation case to me that they recalled thinking it was a personal injury case because this person handles personal injury but does not handle workers' comp cases, and they told the injured worker to contact me. And they called me up, and I spoke with them on the phone about their case, and I'm going to start representing them in their case. And I've handled cases for clients, as you mentioned, over in eastern Kentucky. I've handled cases up in Covington, Kentucky. Most of those from outside of western Kentucky. Most of my cases in western Kentucky come from attorney referrals, but primarily comes from past client referrals, telling their friends and their family members to call me. Most of the cases I get from Louisville, Covington, eastern Kentucky are generally attorney referrals, calling, having their friends, family, or clients calling me up or putting them in touch with me to handle their workers' comp portion of their case.
Well, and I think there's a track record there. You've done this for just over 27 years now, and you bring a wealth of experience, to the case. Whether it's okay, we're going to negotiate this out, or we're going to litigate this case, and you know what you're doing. With all the pressures due to COVID and all the delays and all of the courts making changes and shutting down for a while and then reopening, you still had a pretty good year, and you did some really great work for your clients. Let's talk about that a little bit.
I did. I went back in, a lot of times I would, in January, I'll do kind of a year-end review of the cases. And, I'm looking more on the results as opposed to the dollar figures. I really don't go back and look at the dollar figures a lot from the prior year, but go back and look at the success rate that I've had and what I think, and then try to figure out why this case was more successful than I thought it was going to be, and this other case was not quite as successful as I thought it would be. So I can.
What can you learn from it?
Yeah, so I can learn and tweak and do better for my clients into the future. Even though I've been doing it 27 years, I want to continue to learn and do better for my clients. From that standpoint, this year I did because of the pandemic. I wanted to kind of see, how that played out, and so I looked at the numbers even on the recoveries for my clients, and I mentioned the Social Security cases drying up. Not drying up, but the hearings not occurring from May forward, and I really didn't have. I think I had one decision come in that was what I call a non-the-record decision. It was a decision made favorable for my client without us having to have a hearing after those the couple of telephonic hearings I had in May. So I only had resolved, unfortunately, only 7 of my Social Security cases last year. And so that was, that was down considerably from what it normally is in other years from there. And then I went and looked at the recovery, and even though I only resolved 7 cases for the clients over the life of that client's award for those cases, I recovered just under $2 million for my clients in those 7 Social Security cases, $1.8 million. In benefits that were awarded to my clients over until they would reach normal retirement age for that individual. So even though the numbers were down, I was at least pleased with the recoveries that I made for the clients.
Well, and that's one of the benefits of working directly with you is the fact that, hey, look, you're in good hands, and you know how to navigate the system. You know how to build the case properly. You know how to position it, both in terms of the negotiation and also, again, when you get in front of a judge, how to present properly. Right. And those results kind of speak for themselves in Social Security, especially when you only had less than half of the year that you're really at bat, due to the shutdowns and stuff like this. Let's talk about comp and personal injury on the civil side.
Well, on the civil side, the same when the jury trials shut down the cases resolving kind of slowed down as well. There's been a couple of cases that have resolved since then, and I've got a few right now that I'm kind of finalizing some of the things on them now. But those were cases those frankly are the cases that settle. I mentioned earlier that I normally don't settle a case until maximum medical improvement. The times that I do settle a case before maximum medical improvement is when the client's injuries exceed the policy limits that are available. And there's no sense in waiting to maximum medical improvement. If I can get all the money there is available out there to get, then might as well go ahead and get that for the client, get it to them earlier for a couple of reasons. One, they need the money then if we can get it to them at that point in time. Another reason is the sooner I can get it to that client when you got a policy limit situation that's limiting the recovery, the sooner you can resolve that case, the smaller the health insurance subrogation interest is going to be. So if they get treatment for another 6 months after the settlement, that's more medical bills that the health insurance carrier is going to try to seek back that I'm going to negotiate and get them down as low as I possibly can in that situation. But if I settle it 6 months earlier, then that's a whole lot less that I have to talk the insurance company out of into to accepting less money.
Right. And as many times as we've talked about this, I'm still really, really amazed that in the issues where you're dealing with a tractor trailer accident or you're dealing with a car wreck or a motorcycle crash, it really comes down to the amount of insurance available. And if there's somebody driving around with $30,000, $50,000 worth of insurance, and the case is bad enough, I mean, their insurance company may say, okay, we'll go to the maximum amount available, but after that, we're out.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what you're talking about. Sometimes you've got all you're going to be able to get.
Exactly. And, there's car wrecks, especially, there is a policy limit. Every policy has a policy limit on it. And, with an individual, the minimum coverage in Kentucky is $25,000, and there's a lot of people driving around with only $25,000 of coverage.
Even though I may have $50,000 worth of medical bills.
Exactly. And that's the reason that we talked before that individuals really, really need to have good underinsured motorist coverage. So there's cases where I can settle the liability portion of the claim because it meets policy limits, and then I deal with the underinsured portion of the claim. And frankly, several of the cases that I settled in 2020 were settled for the liability limits, and the underinsured portion of the claim is still going on because I can't get a trial date, and they're not willing to pay the value of the claim. The underinsured carrier is not willing to pay the value of the claim. So, part of the claim is settled, part of it's still ongoing from that standpoint. But, very few cases resolved after May of 2020 last year when the courthouses kind of shut down. Some did from there, but really ultimately only resolved 6 personal injury cases in 2020. Those were, like I said, I don't think any of them resolved after May that were not policy limit settlements, but they were unfortunately low policy limits. But the recoveries there, because there were a couple of those were real good recoveries. The actual recoveries in personal injury, even though it's only 6 cases, was $1.4 million.
Wow.
So we had some good. We had a good gross amount recovered
right.
From that standpoint for the number of cases. Unfortunately, that was because a couple of the cases were catastrophic injury cases. So.
Yeah, and again, if you can't get them to trial, if you can't get them to final negotiation stage, there's not much you can do right now. But even of the cases you're taking in and dealing with, again, substantial progress on that. Congratulations. Right. And then let's wrap up with workers' comp. I mean, that as we had talked about, that you've got different types of benefit structure there with the way that system operates. How did it go in workers' comp?
Workers' comp, it opened back up again in May when they went to video conference hearing. So we were able to resolve a lot of the workers' comp cases, and several of them that actually resolved in 2020 that just hadn't finalized because those settlements have to be approved by a judge, or if we got a judge's hearing in November, December, the appeal process time hadn't resolved. So there are some cases that actually resolved in 2020 that won't get paid until 2021. The benefits won't start coming in as far as the settlement or the award that we obtained for the claimant. But the ones that came in 2020, actually, we were able to resolve 18 workers' compensation cases last year, either by settlement or by a judge's decision. In that are completely final. There are some that are up on appeal, and we got a successful result, and the other side is appealed, and we're working through that process from that standpoint. But that actually paid, and the clients received the money from the settlement or the periodic payments, depending on how the claim resolved. If it resolved by settlement or judge's decision, that was 18 for total recovery of the clients of $2.2 million. In the workers' compensation cases, and that's not including medical. That's just the indemnity, the money going into my client's pocket. From there, the medical for the individuals is not part. That some of them we recovered lifetime medical, some we recovered 15 years of medical benefits, potentially lifetime, because there was a change in the law on lifetime medical in 2018. But that's not money that I'm accounting for in this 2.2.
Right. It still, I sit back and we've worked together for a long time. We've known each other for even longer. And I look at, you've got a year where basically not much happened just because you couldn't get a case moving forward. You could take them in, you could work them up, and you could, help people get treatment. And still, you were delivering multi-million-dollar results for your client base. And that's, Jeff, that's outstanding.
I appreciate that. And I was, when I went back and looked at it, because I was surprised that it was where it was this year. I expected it to be lower than that. Like I said before, though, I've never really paid that much attention to it. This year was the first year I really kind of went back and run those numbers from there. And when I saw where the numbers came out to this year, and I thought, man, I really wish I'd started doing this earlier so I could see, because I was actually proud of, I don't like to brag on myself, but I was proud of the results I obtained for my clients in 2020 and where that come out to. And frankly, I suspect that would be low compared to what I did in 2019, 2018, 2017. Right. So, and I'm hoping it's low compared to what I do in 2021. But we'll have to see what the pandemic brings, and hopefully everything will start opening back up again for us.
Well, and that's, you've had this, I don't want to call it a moniker, but you've kind of had this associated with your brand. And a lot of people think, well, I've got to go to Louisville or Lexington to get a big city lawyer and to kind of, get that legal capability, those teams and stuff. And here you are in Calloway County, competing as well, or better than a lot of those guys. And you've always said, small town, service and big city results. And I think 2020, with all of its challenges, with all of its difficulty, with all of the changes and adaptations you guys had to make, you're delivering multi-million-dollar a year for your clients. Outstanding.
Well, I appreciate that. And that is something that we like to strive to do, at least at my office, and that is, and not just myself, but my entire office staff, is to provide the service that you come to expect from a small town, the small town service, but delivering the big city results. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, Jeff, once again, congratulations on an outstanding year. I know you impacted a lot of lives this year, and the future looks great. So I'm really excited for you. And look forward to having many more of these conversations, and we can talk about some of these cases and kind of how you're kind of in the ring there fighting as hard as anybody else will. And again, friends, we've obviously got to say there's no guarantee of case results. There's no promise. Hey, every case is a $1 million case. I mean, it's not. They stand on their own unique facts. But you're in good hands with Jeff. And Jeff, you bring a lot of trial experience. You bring a lot of knowledge to these cases, be that in the trucking accidents or motor vehicle accidents, be that in the workers' compensation system or in the Social Security system. Friends, you're in good hands, and I definitely recommend that you reach out to Jeff Roberts at the Roberts Law Office down there in Calloway County. Jeff, any parting thoughts as we wrap up this episode?
I appreciate your being here. Appreciate what you just said from that standpoint, and I do hope that everyone's 2021 is bright, and that hopefully we can start going out to eat in restaurants without having to wear these masks. But I understand we've got to try to protect ourselves and protect everybody else at this point in time. But hopefully we're going to have a much better 2021 than it did 2020.
I hope so too. All right, friends. Well, thank you very much for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Jeff will return in 2 weeks. Until then, he invites you to visit jeffrobertslaw.com and follow his firm on Facebook. At the Roberts Law Office, you'll find a history of small town service and big city results.